Hey, Soul Stories fam. We've got a sweet and totally swoon-worthy love story for you today. Let's jump in. On Monday morning, Ink and Steam was far livelier than usual. Over the weekend, a famous food blogger had praised the cafe in an article, and now customers were lining up from the counter all the way to the door. The aroma of freshly ground Arabica coffee blended with the warm scent of baking waffles. Light wood tables, linen upholstered chairs, and vintage bookshelves created a space that felt both cozy and timeless. Behind the counter, the wall was decorated with posters of Parisian cafes, along with a chalkboard listing the day's special, cinnamon cream cappuccino, $4.50. Harper Quinn, the owner and head barista, moved with the precision of a finely tuned production line, grinding beans, tamping espresso, pulling shots, steaming milk, and pouring foam art. Her brown hair was tied high, her gray apron bore a few dried coffee stains, but her blue eyes stayed bright and focused. "Harper, one more latte, no sugar." Chloe, her co-worker and best friend, called from the order pickup counter. Harper just called back, "Got it," and kept moving. The glass door swung open, letting in a gust of cold air. Harper glanced up and saw a man over 6 feet tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit and polished leather shoes. He walked in as though it were his own private lobby, scanning the room once before striding straight to the counter. Without a word, he stepped in front of a college student who had been waiting in line, placed a $20 bill on the counter, and spoke in a low, even but unmistakably cold tone. "Double espresso, now I don't have time to wait." Harper froze. That wasn't a request, it was an order. She glanced at the young woman he'd just cut off, noticing her bow, her head, and avoid eye contact. Harper's temper flared instantly. She set the milk pitcher down firmly, crossed her arms, and looked him straight in the eye. "There's a little thing here called waiting in line. If you want coffee immediately, you can buy your own machine for home. If you want good coffee, you'll wait your turn like everyone else." A few regulars let out quiet ooh sounds. An older man in the corner chuckled. "That's right, Harper." The man in the gray suit narrowed his eyes slightly. He glanced at the long line, then back at Harper, not angry, but as though he were studying her. Without arguing, he gave a slight nod, stepped back to the end of the line near the door, and waited. Harper turned back to the espresso machine, deliberately ignoring him, though she could still feel his calm, unhurried gaze. "Harper?" Chloe's voice came from behind her. She tugged Harper toward the side of the counter, whispering urgently, "Do you even know who you just scolded?" "A customer who doesn't know how to wait his turn," Harper replied flatly. "No, that's Adrian Blake, CEO of Blake Urban, the real estate tycoon who owns half the skyscrapers in Manhattan." Harper blinked, then shrugged. "So what? Here, he's just a customer. Anyone who cuts the line gets called out." Chloe pressed her palm to her forehead. "You're fearless, I'll give you that." The line moved along, and when Harper handed the cappuccino to the last person in queue, she looked up to find the man in the suit gone. Or so she thought until she turned back to the counter and spotted a sleek business card lying neatly next to the tip jar. Embossed in silver letters, Adrian Blake, Blake Urban Development, on the back in elegant fountain pen script. "We'll meet again," Harper smirked. "We'll see about that." She tucked the card into a drawer, determined to forget the whole thing. Meanwhile, outside the cafe, a black SUV idled at the curb. Adrian Blake sat in the back seat, unbuttoning his suit jacket, eyes still fixed on the fogged-up window where Harper worked. Max Rivera, his assistant, turned from the front seat and lowered his voice. "Boss, you're really not mad? Usually one frown from you and people start apologizing all over themselves. But her, different," Adrian replied simply, a faint curve at the corner of his mouth. Max's eyes widened. "Don't tell me you found a new hobby getting told off in public?" Adrian didn't answer. He pulled out his phone and typed a new calendar entry. 9 a.m., Ink and Steam. The SUV pulled away, leaving behind the small coffee shop where Harper had no idea she had just caught the attention of a billionaire, and set in motion a chain of trouble and surprises she could never have imagined. The next morning, Ink and Steam was as busy as ever, But Harper had pretty much forgotten all about Mr. Gray Suit who cut the line from yesterday. She had a rule: never carry yesterday's annoyances into today. And honestly, chances were slim he'd be back. Customers like that usually dropped in once, decided the service wasn't lightning fast enough, and went somewhere else. Harper was focused on foaming milk for a cappuccino when she heard the familiar ting of the door chime. She glanced up and immediately recognized the tall frame, squared shoulders, and crisp white shirt under a navy suit jacket. Adrian Blake. This time he didn't march straight to the counter. He got in line right behind two office ladies ordering green smoothies. No cutting, no comments. Harper raised an eyebrow. When it was his turn, Adrian looked her straight in the eye, his voice even and clear. An affogato macchiato, the most expensive one on the menu. And I'll take the table by the window. Harper frowned slightly. The affogato macchiato was a specialty hot espresso poured over Italian vanilla gelato, topped with a thin layer of foam, not a common order. She nodded, took his payment, and began making the drink. Meanwhile, Adrian calmly took a seat at table 5, right by the large street-facing window. He unfolded a copy of the Wall Street Journal next to a stack of urban development blueprints. Morning light poured in, glinting off the rim of his thin-frame glasses, making him look like he'd stepped straight off a magazine cover. Harper brought over the drink and set it down. "Your coffee." "Thank you." Adrian folded his paper and looked at her. "I like how direct you are. In my line of work, people rarely speak the truth to me." Harper crossed her arms, keeping her distance. "I just follow the rules. Don't block the counter. Yesterday, you definitely blocked the counter." Adrian's lips curved slightly as if suppressing a smile. Max, his assistant, sitting at the next table sipping iced tea, suddenly chimed in. "My boss might have just found a new hobby." A nearby table of students laughed. Harper cracked a brief smile too, but Adrian turned and shot Max a look sharp enough to send him burying himself in his phone. Just then, the cafe hit rush mode. Chloe was dashing between tables. Harper was at the espresso machine, and customers were still pouring in. Table 3's chairs were jammed, preventing new arrivals from sitting down. Before Harper could call Chloe for help, Adrian suddenly stood, rolled up his sleeves, and rearranged the chairs himself. He even grabbed a napkin to wipe up a water spill. Several customers glanced over in surprise. "What are you doing?" Harper asked, half suspicious. "Helping. In my projects, I check every detail myself. Nothing too hard about it." He returned to his table as casually as if nothing had happened. Harper stood still for a moment. Not as arrogant as the rumors, she thought, but quickly shook it off. She wasn't going to let herself be swayed. When the rush eased, Harper walked over with the business card from yesterday and placed it on his table. She slid it toward him. "I don't need VIP treatment from customers. Let's keep boundaries clear." Adrian looked up, the morning light in his gray eyes turning them almost silver. "Boundaries are something I respect," he said, pocketing the card. "But if those boundaries could shift just a little toward friendship, I'd be glad." Harper didn't answer, just tilted her head in a polite nod and went back to the counter. Chloe whispered from behind, "You just turned down a billionaire's friendship." "So what? Friends wait in line like everyone else," Harper replied without missing a beat. As Adrian waited for the check, Max couldn't help asking quietly, "Boss, what's the next step?" "Have coffee here more often," Adrian said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Max grinned. "It's been a while since I've seen you. Interested in someone outside the industry?" Adrian didn't respond, just glanced through the window toward the counter, where Harper was laughing with a regular. There was something in his eyes, not fleeting curiosity, but the look of a man ready to take on a long-term puzzle. That afternoon, Harper got a text from Chloe. "Look at this!" Attached was a screenshot of an article on City Whisper, a gossip site famous for tracking the rich. Real estate kings spotted at small cafe, hunting for deals or for hearts? The photo showed Adrian by the window with his affogato, Harper behind the counter holding a milk frother clearly taken from outside. Harper shook her head and sighed. "Perfect, exactly what I don't need." But somewhere deep down she knew this wasn't going to stop here. On Saturday afternoon, Harper closed ink in steam earlier than usual. She slipped on her beige trench coat, carrying a worn tote bag that held her notebook and an invitation to a book auction. The event was being held at the Greenwich Community Library, a stately red brick building with stone steps worn smooth by time. It was a rare book auction to raise funds for the Children's Bookshelf Project, and Harper had her eye on a prize, a vintage English translation of Les Fleurs du Mal by Baudelaire, a rare 1920s edition. She wanted it for the cafe's reading corner, where customers could sip coffee while browsing special editions. Stepping into the grand hall, Harper was taken aback by the elegant atmosphere, warm light spilling from crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths on every table, and the soft murmur of well-dressed guests. She felt a little out of place in her simple outfit, but her excitement overrode any self-consciousness. The host, an elderly gentleman with a mane of silver hair, introduced each treasure, from Shakespeare manuscripts to signed Jane Austen novels. Harper waited patiently for her coveted book. And now, Les Fleurs du Mal, translated into English by George Dillon, published in 1923, in near-perfect condition. Harper tightened her grip on her paddle, her heart racing. Starting bid, $1,000. She raised her paddle immediately. Others joined in, but she stayed confident. Then, a deep voice from the left side of the room. 2,000. Harper turned. Adrian Blake, in a charcoal suit, casually held up his paddle. Their eyes met and his lips curved slightly, like he'd just stumbled upon an amusing game. Harper narrowed her eyes. 2,500. Without blinking, Adrian said, 3,000. And so it began. Every time Harper raised her bid, Adrian topped it. The room began to buzz. Harper realized he wasn't even looking at the book. His gaze was locked on her. He cannot possibly want this just to read it, she thought in irritation. This is just some must-win rich man's game. Finally, at $5,500, Harper had to stop. She couldn't risk going over the cafe's budget. Sold to bidder number 17. Congratulations, the host announced, striking the gavel. Harper sat down, swallowing her frustration. But a few minutes later, Adrian walked over, the book in hand. He set it in front of her, his expression calm. This belongs somewhere. It will be appreciated. I believe your cafe will do that. You bought it just to give it to me? Harper blinked. Yes, in exchange for one dinner. I want to understand why you wanted it so much. Harper hesitated for a few seconds. Logic told her to refuse, but that uncomfortable sense of owing him pushed through. She gave a small nod. Fine, but after dinner, that's it. Nothing more. I respect that condition, Adrian replied with a smile. As he walked away, Harper noticed Max standing by the entrance, phone in hand, looking like he just landed a tabloid scoop. He waved before disappearing outside. Harper didn't think much of it until her phone buzzed an hour later. A text from an unknown number. Max Rivera, La Lumiere Restaurant, 7 p.m. tomorrow. The menu suits someone who likes scolding my boss. Attached was a link to the city's most luxurious French restaurant, with photos of candlelit tables and exquisitely plated dishes. Harper sighed. Clearly, she had stepped further into their game. But when she looked down at Les Fleurs du Mal in her hands, her fingers tracing the edge of its cover, she couldn't help but smile. She slipped the book into her tote and walked out of the library. On the steps, Adrian was speaking with a donor, but his eyes were still on her, as though he had already mapped out this one dinner and nothing more, and knew it wouldn't end there. Harper had never set foot in La Lumiere, the most renowned French restaurant in the city, until tonight. The moment she stepped through the black-painted wooden doors, she felt she'd entered another world. Crystal chandeliers casting a soft golden glow, a plush red carpet underfoot, and the gentle strains of a violin threading through the air. She wore a knee-length, crew-neck blue knit dress under her beige trench coat. Nothing too fancy, but neat enough. Harper reminded herself, this dinner is just to repay him for the book. Eat, say thank you, go home. A waiter led her past rows of tables draped in pristine white cloth to an unexpected corner by a tall wine rack and a miniature bookcase. Harper blinked in surprise. In such an upscale restaurant, the walnut shelves stacked with leather-bound volumes gave the space a warm, old-world charm. Adrian was already there, jacket off, sleeves of his crisp white shirt rolled slightly. When he saw her, he rose and politely pulled out her chair. "I chose this table thinking you might like it," he said, nodding toward the shelves. "They have a nice collection of first editions from French authors." Harper gave a slight nod, her gaze drawn to the spines of the books. Some she had read in translation, others not. She hadn't expected a real estate tycoon to notice such things. When the menus arrived, Adrian let her choose first. She ordered French onion soup and roast chicken with wine sauce. He went for lobster thermidor and a 15-year Bordeaux. As the appetizers were served, Adrian began, "I grew up in the north side of the city. It wasn't the safest area back then. But what I remember most was the community library. Small building, peeling paint, but inside, always warm and quiet. I'd spend hours there reading whatever I could find." Harper set down her spoon and looked at him. Not quite the steel businessman image the press paints. "The press writes what they want," he shrugged. "Me? I like books. I like places anyone can go, no matter who they are." Harper found herself curious but kept her guard up. She shifted the topic. "And you? Do you come here often?" "Only for business dinners with partners. But tonight," his eyes locked with hers, "is an exception." He leaned forward slightly, voice softer. "I still know so little about you. Your family? Why you hate showing us?" Harper straightened. "I prefer to keep my private life private. Customers want good coffee, not my biography." Adrian paused, then nodded. "Fair enough, but that just makes me more curious." Harper sipped her soup, fighting the urge to smile. He was exactly the persistent type, a wolf circling patiently. As the main courses arrived, a camera shutter clicked near the door. Harper didn't notice until she saw Adrian's head tilt, a flicker of cold steel in his eyes. A man in a leather jacket with a large camera was snapping photos from afar. Heat rushed to Harper's cheeks. "Great, now I'll be in some headline like Billionaire's secret dinner date." "Do you get photographed like that often?" she asked quietly. "Too often," Adrian replied curtly. The man took a few more shots before slipping out. Harper suddenly found her chicken hard to swallow. Without fuss, Adrian signaled the waiter and asked for the check immediately. Dessert forgotten. He paid, stood, and said, "Let's go." Harper started to protest, but he was already helping her into her coat. In the back hallway, he draped his long overcoat over her shoulders, shielding most of her face. "Sorry for pulling you into the spotlight I live in. I forgot. Not everyone wants to be there." His voice was low and sincere. Harper was momentarily thrown off. She'd assumed he'd welcome the chance to be photographed together like many businessmen, but clearly he had no love for the camera. A black SUV waited in the alley. Max opened the door, glancing at Harper with curiosity but keeping silent. On the drive back, Adrian said little, only making small talk about the cafe. The quiet wasn't awkward, just contained. When they reached Ink and Steam, Adrian handed back her coat. "I hope Les Fleurs du Mal has the best spot in your cafe." "It does, thank you. For the ride." Harper stepped out, feeling a mix of relief and a tinge of something she couldn't quite name. That night, while going over the cafe's books, Harper got a text from Chloe. "Hey, you need to see this." It was a link to a new City Whisper post. "Who's the woman in the blue dress? Real estate king Adrian Blake's intimate dinner at La Lumiere." The attached photo clearly showed Harper, even though her head was bowed. Harper sighed. She knew tomorrow she'd have to field a dozen questions from customers and worry about the cafe being scrutinized. This was exactly what she'd wanted to avoid. But this time, it seemed the story had already spun out of her control. By 9 a.m. Tuesday, Ink and Steam felt like a battlefield. Harper stood behind the counter, hands dusted with coffee grounds, a light sheen of sweat on her forehead. The reason, her main supplier had just delivered nearly half the Arabica beans she'd ordered. Chloe rushed over and whispered, "They said the shipment got stuck on another truck. We won't get the rest until tomorrow, but we've only got enough beans for about 3 more hours." Harper frowned, stifling a sigh. 3 hours during the morning rush was nowhere near enough. She quickly called another supplier, only to be told they were out of stock until the weekend. Behind her, the door chime kept ringing, new customers walking in, others waiting for their drinks. Harper kept her voice polite while calling orders, but in her head she was calculating bean usage stick to proper strength and run out early, or water it down and have regulars notice immediately. Just as she was juggling these thoughts, the door opened and Adrian Blake walked in. His light gray suit looked more relaxed today, tie tucked in his pocket, and as usual he headed for the counter, but still stood in line. Harper caught sight of him, but before she could say hello, he seemed to pick up on the unusual tension. Her hand was gripping the tamper tightly, movements sharper and faster than normal. "What's going on?" Adrian asked when it was his turn. "Supplier shorted my order. I'm running ration mode today," Harper replied shortly without looking up. Adrian was silent for a few seconds, then rested his hand on the counter, eyes glinting with sudden inspiration. "Marry me. I'll make sure your supply chain runs smoothly for life." Harper's head snapped up, eyes wide. The cafe, which had been buzzing, fell silent for a beat, and then, boom! Laughter burst out like fireworks. An older woman clapped her hands in delight. Chloe, from behind the serving counter, nearly dropped a tray of lattes from laughing too hard. Harper planted a hand on her hip and tilted her head at him. "Are you out of your mind?" The laughter doubled. Max, sitting at a table near the door, whistled and called out, "My boss is trending again." Harper shook her head, turning back to the espresso machine, suppressing the smile tugging at her lips. This was peak Adrian confidence bordering on the absurd. When she handed a drink to the next customer and returned to the counter, Adrian was still there, not smiling. His gaze was steady, his voice calm enough to make her pause. "I'm serious." The simple statement, paired with that unblinking eye contact, made time seem to slow for a moment. Instantly, red flags waved in Harper's mind. A man offering to take care of everything for her. Where had she heard that before? Memories of her ex surfaced, how he'd made her change the cafe menu because that item's too slow to sell, how he'd insisted she remove old books because customers will think the place is outdated. What began as help had become control over every decision, from which beans to buy to her opening hours. Harper drew a slow breath, keeping her tone even. "I can handle it myself. I don't need anyone running my supply chain for me." Unexpectedly, Adrian didn't argue, didn't push. He simply nodded, as if committing her words to memory. "All right, but if the day ever comes when you do need it, call me." He took a fresh business card from his wallet and set it on the counter. Harper stared at the glossy, embossed card, a sort of priority pass she hadn't asked for. "No thanks," she said, pushing it back toward him. Adrian smiled, didn't take it, and turned for the door. When the door closed behind him, Harper looked at the card for a few seconds. She picked it up, crumpled it, the paper giving a sharp crackle, and tossed it in the trash. But minutes later, while tidying the counter, she found herself bending down, fishing it out, smoothing it flat, and slipping it into the drawer beneath the espresso machine. Just in case, she told herself. For emergencies. But deep down, she knew keeping it had nothing to do with the supply chain at all. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. That afternoon, gray clouds drifted overhead, undecided about rain. Ink and steam had just passed the lunch rush. The espresso machine was silent for now, replaced by the clink of spoons against mugs and the soft hum of a jazz playlist. Harper was doing inventory in the storage room when Chloe popped her head in, whispering, "Adrian's out in the back alley. Says he wants to talk, if you're okay with it." Harper paused, glancing at the mirror in the corner, white shirt neatly tucked into her gray apron, hair pulled up high, a few stray strands falling forward. She almost said she wasn't free, but the phrase, "if you're okay with it," made her change her mind. At least he knew how to knock. She opened the back door. The air outside carried the smell of pastries from the bakery next door, damp wood from stacked pallets, and a faint trace of car exhaust. The narrow sidewalk ran alongside a row of fire escapes bolted to brick walls. Adrian stood beside a wooden planter of mint Harper had planted herself, sleeves rolled to his forearms, jacket draped over one arm. He didn't step closer, just gave a polite nod. "Thanks for coming out," he said. "I'll keep it short." Up to you, I've got stock to check. A brief smile flickered at the corner of his mouth before vanishing. Adrian looked up at the gray sky, drew a breath, as if pushing something heavy out of his chest. My mother and the board are pressuring me to get married. Well-matched backgrounds, stabilize the image, inspire confidence after recent deals. His voice was even, each word deliberate. They've got a schedule, photos of suitable candidates, suggested announcement dates, venues. They're calling it an integrated communications plan. Harper crossed her arms. The phrase suitable candidates made her want to step back. She stared at him. So, you thought of me? Why? I'm not on that list. Adrian met her gaze. This time, no assessing look, no playful smile, just bare sincerity laid out in the washed-out noon light. Because I don't want marriage to be a PR contract. If I have to marry, I want someone I actually like, someone who'll call me out when I'm wrong and make me better. Harper said nothing. The city noise seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of her own heartbeat in her ears. The phrase, call me out when I'm wrong, hit a chord she rarely let anyone touch. The need to be seen and respected. But she quickly rebuilt her walls. I'm not playing a role in your family drama, Harper said slowly. I'm not waving on a red carpet while mentally calculating how many kilos of beans I went through today. I'm sure not going to be a cover photo for an image strategy. Adrian nodded. His voice was calm, without offense. I get that, and I've earned your suspicion tabloid headlines, paparazzi shots, the noise of my world. But I'm not here to drag you into that spotlight. I'm here to make a straightforward offer and take a straightforward no. Harper looked at his shoes, polished enough to reveal the hand of someone who cared about tying laces, but dusted with grit from the sidewalk. She looked at the mint plant she'd built the planter for, its leaves trembling in the breeze. Then she asked the one thing she needed to know most. If we married, what part of my life would you touch? Adrian tilted his head slightly, clearly ready for the question. Nothing, unless you wanted me to. Specifically, I don't interfere in cafe operations. No PR teams, no brand collaborations, no changing the menu, hours, or pricing. I don't use my money to fix what you see as professional challenges. I'm only there when you knock. And my private life, Harper pressed, I don't post, don't reveal, don't parade it. If public appearances are necessary, I ask first and take no for an answer. He paused, then added, I'll have long nights at the office and last-minute flights. But I come home when I've promised. I don't use busy as an excuse. Harper let out a wry remark. Got that memorized, did you? Adrian smiled, a hint of self-mockery. I wrote it down. Last night. The wind stirred the mint leaves. Harper looked at his hands used to signing contracts, but also, as she'd seen, moving chairs for strangers. For a moment, a shadow of her ex flickered in her mind, how he'd said, I'm helping, before taking over every decision until she barely recognized her own cafe. Red flags flashed in her head. She kept her voice flat. Some of what you're saying sounds right, but words are cheap. I've seen people promise and then forget. Adrian didn't argue. His seriousness matched the day he'd said, I'm serious at the counter. I won't push. I'll prove I can be in your life without changing you. How? By showing up every morning with flowers that say, thanks for yelling at me? Harper teased. By disappearing if my presence makes you feel unsafe. Adrian answered instantly. And by staying if you say, stay. The last part made Harper pause. She didn't want to admit she understood what safe meant in that sentence. An image of his mother crossed her mind, the woman who had come into her cafe, bought 10 drinks for a hospital, and spoke like a mother who didn't want her son alone. Clearing her throat, she changed the subject. What will your mother and the board say if you don't choose a strategic alliance? They'll be annoyed. The press will run a few snide headlines, but they'll get used to it. I didn't build a company just to live by someone else's script. His eyes held hers. I'm not building a family that way either. A stronger gust brought a few drops of rain. Harper tightened the apron strings. Her voice was the softest it had been with him. You say family like this is real. To me, marriage is real, Adrian said lightly, as if he'd thought it long before. If I couldn't treat it as real, I wouldn't do it. The quiet between them wasn't as hard as before. From the front of the cafe came the door chime, new customers. Chloe would handle them. Harper leaned back against the brick wall, looking up at the slice of sky framed by the fire escape. Let's say, I say no. What then? I line up like any customer, order an affogato, read in the corner, drop change in the tip jar, and leave. He smiled faintly. Occasionally check the chalkboard to see what snarky thing you've written. Harper laughed out loud, short and quick. She quickly composed herself. And if I say it's still too soon to trust you? I ask for time, Adrian said, not to win you over with flowers or restaurants, but to let you see me keep my word in small things. If it's still a no, I respect it like a wall I won't climb. It wasn't a perfect answer, but grown up enough. Harper realized her hands had loosened. She gave a small, non-binding nod. Then start small, about City Whisper. If you see them lurking again, don't say anything they can cut into a headline. I don't want my cafe in the evening news. Agreed, I don't like the cameras either. That night at La Lumiere, I learned the hard way. I'm sorry. Harper looked at him a moment longer. The sorry didn't have the polish of someone used to cameras. It was rough but real. She took a breath. I haven't said yes. Don't get any ideas. I heard you, Adrian smiled. Don't get any ideas. That's a very hopeful sentence. Don't joke. I'm not joking. A raindrop fell onto a mint leaf, scattering into tiny beads. Adrian shrugged his jacket back on. I have to go. 3 o'clock design review for the new Riverside Park. He glanced at the planter. I'll buy a few more like this for the cafe, if you want. I can grow my own, Harper said without the usual edge. Thanks. He nodded, stepping back as if reminding himself to respect the distance. Before turning away, Adrian added, if you ever feel I've crossed a line, just say, stay still. I'll stay still. You think you're a dog? Harper arched an eyebrow. I think I can learn commands. Harper let out an unplanned laugh. Adrian laughed too, this time showing a dimple no paparazzo had ever caught. Then he turned down the sidewalk, the gray of his suit fading past the corner. She stood there for a moment, hearing her heart beat slow. Her mind still strung with cautious red flags, but among them, a small yellow light had just switched on. By evening, Harper had wiped down the counter, changed the playlist, and written on the chalkboard, drink coffee like reading a book. Don't stop at the first page. Customers chuckled, snapping photos for their stories. Chloe whispered, nice one, and slid Harper a roll of new labels she'd bought. Harper went to the reading corner. On the wooden shelf, Les Fleurs du Mal sat between 2 wine-red cloth-bound volumes. She picked up a label pen and carefully wrote a line, sticking it neatly beneath the spine. Once belonged to someone else, now it's home. She stepped back. The line was tiny, but it fit. Not exactly a message to anyone, but a note to herself. Something that once strayed could still find its right place, if the person holding it knew to respect what it was. At the counter, the door chime rang again. Harper turned, offering her professional smile to the new customer, her voice light and easy. Welcome to Ink and Steam. What can I get you today? In the days following their conversation in the alley, Harper expected Adrian to disappear for a while, just like he'd promised, if she needed space. Instead, he chose another approach. Show up regularly, quietly, unobtrusively, and stick to every boundary she'd set. Every morning at exactly 8:15, Ink and Steam's door chimed its familiar ting. Adrian would step inside, dressed neatly but without flash, navy or charcoal suit, tie tucked in his pocket, slim laptop in hand. He stood in line like any other customer, never cutting ahead, never raising his voice. When his turn came, he simply said, an affogato. Thank you. Harper treated him like any other patron. Take the order, hand over the drink, polite thank you exchanged. But inside, she couldn't help noticing. Each day he chose a different bean origin, as though quietly working his way through the cafe's entire menu. From time to time, Harper would arrive in the morning to find a small bouquet of white tulips or purple carnations placed on the table near the counter. The note always read just one sentence. Thanks for scolding me. Chloe would double over laughing when she saw them, while Harper would pretend to treat the flowers as if they came from some regular, never admitting their true source. On the counter sat a small glass jar labeled Fun for Children's Reading Corner. One evening, when Harper and Chloe were counting donations, they found a neat bundle of large bills several times the usual amount. Neither said anything, but Harper knew, and so did Mr. Doyle, the owner of the old bookshop. He only smiled, keeping the secret. On weekends, the cafe's reading corner hosted children's story workshops. Harper, busy behind the counter, happened to notice brand new books, a set of pastel-painted chairs, and a storyboard easel. Mr. Doyle leaned over and murmured, "Don't ask who paid for it. Just know. They wanted to stay anonymous." Harper pressed her lips together but felt a warmth in her chest. One morning, Harper arrived to open the cafe and found a whiteboard propped outside. In colorful marker, it read, "Team Mary, Team Not Yet." Two columns stood ready for customers to drop voting slips. Chloe was stationed right there, grinning ear to ear. "Cast your vote, free coffee refill." By day's end, Team Mary was winning by a landslide, though Team Not Yet still had a handful of votes, mostly from Harper and a 7-year-old boy Adrian had once caught sneaking a coffee sample. After a week of this soft offensive, Harper decided it was time to make things crystal clear. 1. No interference in cafe operations, including buying supplies, choosing the menu, or hiring staff. 2. No media appearances, no interviews, no joint photos at the cafe. 3rd, no using influence to solve minor problems from running out of milk to handling customer complaints. Adrian didn't just nod, he pulled out a notebook, signed under the heading "Read and Agreed," and handed it to Harper. "Consider the verbal contract officially stamped," he said, half joking. One slow afternoon, Max, playing the all-purpose assistant, insisted on learning to make a latte to share the load with Harper. The result, milk foam overflowing the cup, coffee splattered across the counter, and the steam wand out of commission for cleaning. Harper was about to intervene when she saw Adrian roll up his sleeves, grab a rag, and start washing cups like a seasoned barista, each movement slow, precise, methodical. "You've done this before?" Harper asked, surprised. "In college, I worked at a cafe near the library," Adrian replied casually. "Not every job starts in a boardroom." Harper's lips twitched in a smile, but she made sure he didn't see it. That evening, as Harper was closing out the sales ledger, a slim envelope appeared at the cafe's door. Inside was an invitation to a large-scale book fundraising event at the City Hall. In the lower corner, embossed in raised letters, primary sponsor, Blake Foundation. Harper held the letter, curiosity and caution warring in her mind. What is he planning now? On the night of the gala, Harper chose a simple olive green midi dress with a light jacket. Her hair was tied low, makeup minimal. Every choice was intentional. Keep attention away. To her, this was just a community event, a chance to meet small partners, share about children's book projects, and get home early enough to open the cafe tomorrow. City Hall's grand hall glowed in warm golden light, a piano playing softly in the corner of the stage. At the white linen-covered reception table, guests signed in and received name tags. Harper scanned the room, familiar faces from nonprofit organizations, a few teachers, some publishing folks. The atmosphere buzzed with polite energy. She chose a table tucked away near the back, sitting next to Mr. Doyle and an older librarian. After a few pleasantries, Harper took out her notebook, ready to listen to presentations on the new library projects. When the MC introduced our main sponsor, the Blake Foundation, Harper's fingers tightened on her bag strap. Adrian stepped out from the wings in a perfectly cut black suit and silver tie, carrying himself like it was his own boardroom. Applause rolled through the hall. He began speaking about the importance of sustaining community libraries, about children needing safe spaces to read. His voice was low, steady, and full of conviction. Harper, despite herself, had to admit he was a gifted speaker. But then, near the end, Adrian's gaze swept the crowd and landed exactly where she sat. "I hope to find someone to read with for the rest of my life." Just one sentence, but the entire audience turned toward Harper. Whispered murmurs rose, and someone nearby even gave her a knowing smile. Heat rushed to Harper's face. She gripped her notebook like it might make her invisible. What the hell was that? Boundary number 2. No media appearances, no public hints. He had just brushed right up against it. On stage, Adrian paused just long enough for her to catch the flicker of, was that an apology? He didn't explain or linger, but closed his speech quickly and bowed to the audience. Still, Harper couldn't pretend nothing happened. Being shoved under the spotlight in front of hundreds of eyes sent her pulse racing and her hands trembling slightly. When the program broke for intermission, Harper started to rise only to spot a too familiar figure near the exit. The leather-jacketed photographer from La Lumiere. His camera lens was aimed straight at her table. City Whisper wouldn't miss a moment like this. She heard the click, saw the soft burst of flash. Tomorrow's headline was already writing itself. Future Mrs. Real Estate King teases the woman in his life. Without a word to anyone, Harper headed straight for the side exit of the hall. Her steps were brisk, breath hot and quick. Someone, maybe Mr. Doyle, called her name softly, but she didn't stop. Outside, rain had started suddenly, cold drops stinging her cheeks. Her jacket soaked quickly. Harper found a small awning at the side of the building and stepped under it. The scent of wet earth and the steady roar of rain slowly steadied her heartbeat. She looked out at the street, where headlights blurred through the downpour. 2 choices: go home and let it go, or go back and tell Adrian exactly what she thought. Harper took a deep breath, pulled her collar tighter. Avoidance wasn't going to solve this. If he wanted to test boundaries, she'd show him the result right now. Leaving the awning, she stepped back toward the side door, ready to confront him. Harper strode quickly down the side corridor, rainwater clinging to her coat sleeves, icy against her wrists. The heavy fire door behind her muted the piano and polite chatter of the main hall. Only the click of her heels echoed off the stone floor. She turned left, heading straight for the backstage area. Volunteers were carting gift boxes. A sound tech adjusted a mic. On one wall, a stage layout was scribbled over in red marker. Adrian stood at the far end beside a black backdrop, speaking with an event coordinator. His jacket was unbuttoned, a few programs tucked under one arm. When he saw her, his conversation stopped. His expression loosened like he'd just met the moment he knew would come. "We need to talk," Harper said, her voice low but sharp. He nodded, handed his papers to the coordinator, and gestured for privacy. They left, leaving just enough space for the 2 of them to stand face to face. The air smelled faintly of painted canvas, damp wood, machine oil from the stage rigging, and rain still clinging to Harper's clothes. "You're disrupting my life," she began bluntly. Adrian didn't flinch. A brief beat passed, then he said, "You have every right to be angry, and you're right to be." "Why did you say that line on stage?" Harper's voice was tight. "I made the boundaries clear. No hints, no playful digs in front of the media. And yet I just wanted you to notice me," Adrian cut in, voice dropping. "Like that first day at the cafe when you were the only one who told me the truth. In places like this, no one speaks honestly. They clap on cue, smile on cue. I was selfish. I'm sorry." Harper's laugh was short and bitter. "The price of selfish is City Whisper plastering my face on a headline tomorrow, and my cafe becoming the backdrop for their gossip. Did you think about that?" "I did. Too late. And that's on me." He didn't reach for her or step closer. His stance was solid, his voice steady. "No excuses. If you want, I'll ask the organizers to cut that line from the recording. I'll request it never be posted." Her grip on her bag tightened. Her anger wasn't just from the line, it was the feeling of being shoved under a spotlight where every glance carried meaning. She drew a deep breath. "I'm afraid of being swallowed whole," she said, the words cracking open a box she'd kept shut. "I loved someone once who turned everything of mine into his. First it was a suggestion. Lose the old books, they look outdated. Then a request, change your hours so I can drop by. Then an order, drop this drink, add that one, I know the market better." One day I looked around and my cafe wasn't mine anymore. He even wanted the sign to carry his name. I ran from that kind of help. She stopped, the taste of rain still bitter on her tongue. "Your world is stages, auditoriums, PR campaigns. My world is wooden tables, fresh ground coffee, a kid reading their first picture book. We live in two different worlds. Don't waste your time." The last line slammed the door shut. Adrian's eyes closed for a second. When they opened, he didn't argue. "I understand," he said softly. And then, exactly as he'd promised from the start, he stepped back, not figuratively, but literally a single step to widen the space between them. "If that's what you want, I'll disappear." She hadn't expected the answer so quickly. She'd built up a wall of counter-arguments, but suddenly the wall in front of her moved away. The lightness felt awkward. "Disappear?" she repeated, testing the sound of it. "I won't come to the cafe. No flowers, no money in the jar, no anonymous workshops, not a trace. I'll leave you, in peace." He made sure she understood, then fell silent. A staffer bustled between them with a stack of programs, murmuring an apology before vanishing into the shadows. The quiet returned. Harper stared up at the dim green of the exit sign above them, then down at the wet crescent blooming on the floor beneath her shoes. A strange image rose in her mind. The table by Ink and Steam's window at 8:15 every morning, sunlight pooling across it, an affogato sweating in its glass, a folded newspaper. If tomorrow that table sat empty, would she really feel the relief she thought she wanted? Or would the emptiness knock against her chest, leaving an echo she couldn't ignore? Harper hated questions without immediate answers. She looked back at him. His eyes didn't dodge. No pleading, no bargaining, just open, waiting. "I'm not telling you to disappear," she said slowly, then corrected herself. "I haven't decided." Adrian didn't smile. He gave the smallest nod, like someone receiving an unopened envelope. "It's your decision. I won't touch it." "You really don't like cameras?" she asked suddenly, clinging to something concrete. "No," he answered instantly. "I've learned to live with them because of my job, but I don't like them. At La Lumiere, I reacted too slow. Here, I spoke too fast. Both were my mistakes." Harper laughed, not from amusement, but at the clumsy honesty in his answer. The sound faded quickly as she remembered her irritation. "I'm leaving now. You stay and be a good main sponsor." "I will," he said, holding that same distance, "and I'll leave through the back." "Good." She turned for the door but paused with her hand on the bar. "Tomorrow, if you come to the cafe, line up like always. Don't say anything." "I have and I will," he replied. "And stop sending flowers. Tulips make Chloe lose her mind." "I'll send books," he said lightly, then corrected himself. "Sorry, I'll send nothing." This time she didn't laugh. She gave a faint nod, pushed the door open. Piano music and applause washed over her in a wave. She pulled her collar up and slipped back out into the rain. Cold drops tapped her forehead, cooling the heat in her thoughts. That night, Harper got home late. Her third-floor apartment smelled faintly of wood and the coffee still clinging to her clothes. She hung up her coat, switched on the warm light over the table, and opened the window to let in the night rain. On the table sat the bean order ledger, a fresh roll of labels, and her phone face down. She drew up the weekly stock chart, Arabica, Robusta, special blends, her hands moving on habit while her mind circled back to one line from the hallway. "I'll disappear if that's what you want." The words were like a hook snagged deep in her chest. She tried to close the night with her usual ritual. Brewing a cup of mint tea, the kettle hummed softly. Steam carried the cool scent upward. She held the mug at the window, looking down at the empty street. The rain had softened to mist, streetlights smearing on wet pavement. Her phone buzzed. She didn't rush. 2 beats, 3. She set down the mug, flipped it over. One message, no emojis, no subject. Adrian Blake. "I'm sorry for what I said at the gala. I'll keep silent. Sleep well." Harper stared at the text for a long moment. Nothing more. No, see you tomorrow. No, give me a chance. Just an apology, a promise, and a good night. She switched off the screen, rested her forehead against the frame, exhaling slowly. The anger had ebbed, leaving damp sand where a footprint might vanish instantly. Across the street, the wind shook rain from the last leaves, glittering under the lamplight. Harper lifted her mug, took a sip. Cool mint. She set her alarm 10 minutes earlier than usual for checking the donation jar, straightening the reading corner, and glancing at the window table before 8:15. She turned off the main light, leaving only the small golden desk lamp. The apartment drew in on itself, quiet as a dog-eared page. Somewhere else in the city, maybe another light was burning, and a man was learning how to stand still. Thursday morning at Ink and Steam was in its calm before the storm rhythm. Harper was wiping down the counter, glancing at the door whenever the familiar ting-ting chime rang. The door swung open, and in stepped a familiar figure, elegant, poised, yet carrying a quiet warmth. Evelyn Blake. Harper immediately recalled the last time Evelyn had come in, ordering 10 coffees to take to the nearby hospital. Back then, she'd assumed it was a polite gesture from a powerful woman. But now, seeing Evelyn return alone, Harper sensed this visit wasn't about coffee. Evelyn queued like any other customer, no scanning for special treatment, no request to be served first. When her turn came, she ordered simply, "1 cappuccino for here, and if you still have fresh waffles, I'll take 2. Harper blinked. People from Adrian's circle usually went for something far more complicated. "Fresh out of the oven 5 minutes ago," Harper replied, keeping her tone even. Evelyn chose a table by the window, the same one Adrian usually occupied. Harper brought the order over, and as she set it down, Evelyn smiled. "Thank you. I probably kept you and your staff running the last time I was here." "We're used to busy days," Harper said, sitting when Evelyn gestured. "Though I admit, that was a surprise." Evelyn sipped her coffee, her eyes softening. "I'm not here to interfere with your work. I just wanted to talk." Harper was wary but couldn't refuse. She folded her apron neatly onto the chair beside her. "All right. I've noticed he's smiling more since he met you," Evelyn said. Harper frowned slightly. "I don't think—" "You may not think it, but I see it," Evelyn said, her smile faint but sure. "I once thought he should marry appropriately, someone from our world. Same background, same tables. But it turns out the right person is the one who makes him less alone." Harper stayed silent. It didn't feel like pressure or a sales pitch for marriage. It sounded more like a genuine acknowledgement. Evelyn rested her chin lightly on her hand. "At the gala, you seemed upset with him." Harper gave a dry laugh. "Seemed? I wanted to drag him off the stage. I hate being shoved into a spotlight I didn't ask for. And that's something he needs to learn." Evelyn nodded. "Adrian's smart, but he sometimes forgets other people don't live in his world." Harper sighed. "I just want this place to stay peaceful. And I have a free children's book fund here. Every week I put shelves out so kids can take books home or read in the corner. I can't let noise or gossip ruin that safe feeling." Evelyn's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful. My brother used to run a community library in Boston. I know what it means to give kids access to books." They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment. Outside, sunlight filtered through the trees, casting moving shadows on the wooden table. Evelyn took another sip of her cappuccino, her voice as light as the breeze. "Marriage isn't a project. If you need time, just make him line up like any other customer." Harper smiled, this time genuinely. "Thank you. Really?" Evelyn stood, placing a glass jar of cookies on the table. "Family recipe. Have them with your coffee. They might soften your sharp tongue a little." Harper let out a quiet laugh, taking the jar. "I'll try them, but I'm not promising to be less sharp." They shook hands, firm, warm, not the perfunctory kind, but the respectful grip of two women meeting on equal ground. Evelyn left the cafe, her measured steps carrying her down the sidewalk, leaving behind the scent of coffee and something harder to name. Harper watched her go, exhaling with a faint but unexpected sense of lightness. When she turned back to the counter, she spotted fresh chalk writing on the board near the register. "Read together for a lifetime?" The letters slanted slightly with a tiny heart beside them. "Who wrote this?" Harper called out. Chloe, wiping down a table, only winked and walked away, leaving Harper standing there, caught between embarrassment and warmth. The morning at Harper's Nook began like any other. The chime of the doorbell, the aroma of roasted coffee blending with the scent of freshly baked pastries, and the murmur of regular customers chatting. Harper was bending over to check the newly delivered batch of coffee beans, only to find that the shipment was short. She clenched her teeth. Perfect. Monday morning, starting off with a careless supplier. The door opened again. Not a customer, Max, Adrian's assistant. Gone was the sharp suit. Instead, he wore a dark jacket and a baseball cap, but his tense expression was enough for Harper to know something was wrong. "Ms. Harper," Max lowered his voice, stepping closer to the counter. "I think you should know about this." "What is it?" Harper looked up, her tone still guarded. "My boss is sick. High fever since last night. I called a doctor, but he won't let anyone in." Harper frowned. "And you came here to tell you. I believe if it's you, he won't turn you away." Max placed a slip of paper with an address on the counter. "Penthouse 58, Avalon Tower. The rest is up to you." Harper stared at the paper, her chest tightening slightly. "I don't have any obligation." Yet the way Max had said, "if it's you," kept replaying in her mind, like someone gently knocking on a door she had kept shut. The private elevator glided smoothly past glowing numbers. When the doors opened, Harper stepped into a space so cold and perfect, it felt almost lifeless. High ceilings, dark wooden floors, expensive abstract paintings, and the entire city sprawled beneath the hazy midday sky. Adrian sat on a leather sofa, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, hair slightly tousled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked up, surprise and confusion flickering across his face. "Why are you here?" "Max said you're sick. I just wanted to make sure you're not lying dead on top of your contracts." He gave a faint chuckle, cut short by his hoarse voice and labored breathing. Harper set her bag on the table. Ginger tea, honey, lemons, and a container of hot soup. "Hand." She held out a thermometer. He obeyed. 101.3 degrees Fahrenheit. "With a fever like this, you didn't call a doctor? You think you're Superman?" Harper scolded, heading straight into the kitchen. Everything was white and gleaming, but the fridge was nearly empty. She rummaged around and found just enough basics to make tea and reheat the soup. Adrian sat quietly watching her, his eyes softer than usual. "I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't think I'd come either." Her words kept him silent for a long moment. As the rain began to fall, Harper stood by the glass wall, fingertips brushing the cool surface. From here, the city was nothing but tiny dots of light and winding roads. She suddenly understood why this place felt so lonely and why he might need someone to pull him down from the clouds. "It's so high," she murmured. "Come down to the streets with me sometimes?" His voice was rough, not a command but a quiet invitation. Harper didn't answer, just set the soup down in front of him and sat across. He ate slowly, as if savoring every second. Spaghetti with jarred tomato sauce. Simple, stir-fried vegetables, completely out of place in this lavish setting. Harper cooked while telling stories of her college days, living on instant noodles for a week straight, half to save money, half to challenge her stomach. Adrian rested his chin on his hand, occasionally smiling at her ridiculous details. The smell of food, the sound of boiling water, and their laughter made the kitchen feel less cold. "Thank you for coming." He spoke as they were nearly done eating. "I know you don't owe me anything." "True, but I hate leaving someone sick alone." She met his eyes this time without looking away. Seeing her to the door, Adrian didn't try to stop her, just leaned against the frame in a sweater, watching her go. "Be careful, and see you tomorrow." That night, Harper received a text. "I never thought a penthouse could feel warm. Thank you for changing that." Harper sat by her own window looking toward Avalon Tower, a faint, undefined feeling stirring in her chest, not quite love, but definitely no longer distance. The next morning, Harper arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. The rain from last night had left glistening streaks on the windows, reflecting the soft, muted light. She made herself a cappuccino, but didn't drink it, her eyes fixed on the phone lying face down on the table. "He hasn't texted again." She sighed, then shook her head as if to dismiss the thought. By mid-morning, just as the cafe was starting to get busy, the door opened and Adrian walked in. No suit, no tie, just a charcoal crewneck sweater, his hair still slightly damp from the rain. He stood in line like any other customer, hands in his pockets, coughing lightly now and then. "You should have stayed home and rested." Harper frowned when he reached the counter. And miss a cappuccino made by you? Not a chance. Max followed behind, holding a file bag, and gave Harper a look that said the boss still wasn't fully recovered, but had insisted on coming. Harper didn't argue. She poured the coffee into a paper cup and wrote on the lid, "Drink slowly or you'll burn yourself." Adrian gave a faint smile when he read it. Instead of taking his usual seat by the window, Adrian chose a spot in the corner near the children's bookshelf. He picked up a comic book, flipped through a few pages, and then actually started reading. Harper glanced over several times to make sure he wasn't just pretending for her benefit. When he left, he dropped an envelope into the donation jar. Harper opened it after the rush had eased inside wasn't money, but a voucher for printing 200 photo books for the cafe's upcoming workshop. She stood still for a long moment, feeling a mix of gratitude and the urge to believe she'd been wrong to think he was only the controlling type. That afternoon, drizzle still misted the streets. Harper glanced at the menu board, then picked up her phone and dialed a number she'd almost deleted a few days ago. "Do you still have a fever?" she asked when he picked up. "It's gone. Are you worried about me?" His voice was half teasing, half pleased. "Don't get ahead of yourself. I just thought eating dinner alone in that apartment sounded a little sad." There was a pause on the other end, then, "Tonight? I'll cook. You just need to show up and stay out of the kitchen." Harper arrived with a basket of food: beef stew, salad, fresh-baked bread. The apartment was still as luxurious as ever, but today it had a few new touches. A small vase of flowers on the dining table, the scarf she'd given him neatly folded on a chair. While Harper laid the food out, Adrian put on soft jazz. The sound of the saxophone mingled with the aroma of warm bread, creating an intimacy that kept them both quiet for a moment. "I used to think you'd never set foot in here a second time." "I thought so too," Harper smiled. "But yesterday I realized I don't want to see you sick and alone again." Adrian's gaze met hers, softening not with flirtation, but with a quiet nod. That morning, Harper arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. The crisp November air lingered outside, and wisps of mist clung to the window panes. As she unlocked the door to ink and steam, her thoughts drifted to everything that had happened from the first time she'd met Adrian in that wrongly scolded incident, to the mornings he'd patiently stood in line, rinsed cups, and the moments he'd made her so angry her hands shook. She didn't know how the day would begin, but she was certain she wasn't expecting what was about to happen. Around 8 a.m., a few regulars had already settled in. Harper was wiping the counter when Adrian walked in, still in his thick gray coat and black knit scarf. He smiled and joined the line as always. When it was his turn, he simply said, "One cappuccino, same as always." Harper nodded, and as she finished pouring the smooth white foam, she noticed a delicate line of chocolate syrup forming the words, "Marry me." She looked up wide-eyed. Adrian remained calm, as if this were no different than writing a customer's name. He nudged the cup toward her, and from under the saucer, a small envelope slid out. Inside was a handwritten card. "If you say no, I'll still be the customer who stands in line, still donate books. If you say yes, I promise to protect your boundaries, never control your dreams." The writing wasn't ornate, but every stroke was steady. Harper read it over and over, feeling warmth rise in her chest. This wasn't a grand proposal under flashing lights. This was an offering placed right on the counter where he'd stood so many mornings, just waiting for his turn. Harper let out a soft laugh and shook her head. "You're still the same." Adrian tilted his head, smiling. "I figured as much. But you're the kind of same I can handle." She nodded, clear, no hesitation. In that moment, it wasn't just Adrian, the entire cafe seemed to erupt. Chloe shouted from a table, "Finally!" Max wiped at his eyes, sniffling. "Don't tell me I missed filming this." Adrian came around the counter and pulled Harper into his arms. The scent of coffee mingled with the smell of wood, and his scarf a strangely familiar comfort. No need for many words, just a hug. But it was enough for her to know she'd made the right choice this time. The wedding took place on a golden autumn afternoon, inside the restored community library, funded by an anonymous donation the year before. Tall shelves, the scent of new paper mixed with old wood, sunlight streaming through the grand windows, all of it wrapped the moment in warmth and quiet grace. Harper wore a simple white dress, holding a bouquet of lavender and small daisies. Adrian never took his eyes off her, not even while the minister read the vows. When they exchanged rings, he leaned in, murmuring just for her, "I'll still stand in line every morning, even if you're my wife." Harper's laughter rang out, blending into the applause. With Adrian's transparent investment, Ink and Steam opened a second location in the Arts District. Harper kept full control hiring staff, curating the selection for the free reading shelf. On weekend mornings, Adrian often sat in the corner table reading, sometimes helping make coffee when the cafe was busy. Regulars called him the CEO who washes mugs, and he just smiled, never denying it. The chalkboard outside the cafe today read, "Marry me." She said yes. Beneath it, in Chloe's smaller handwriting, "And he still stands in line." From behind the counter, Harper looked out at the scene, her heart full of a peace she'd once thought she'd never find again.